Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and a continuing series, Sega Race Renaissance, where I review every single arcade racing game that Sega ever made in 3D, and today we're taking a look at F-Zero AX. I know it's a Nintendo property, but it is 100% a Sega developed game, and it counts for this series. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But F-Zero AX is a very interesting story because it runs on the TriForce arcade hardware, which is just a GameCube that could interface with different types of technologies. But what I'm actually doing is playing the GameCube version because via hex editing and using codes, the full version of the arcade AX variant is within the game itself. So if you have F-Zero for the GameCube on your shelf, you also have the arcade version built right in. You just need to add some codes. But honestly, F-Zero's never been my favorite franchise. I've always played them, but they've never really stuck with me too much, except for this game. This is the one F-Zero game that I really do get into, I really do enjoy playing, and I actually feel like it has that racing that Sega's known for that I love so much. But I'm sure the reason I love this one extra is because Sega did develop it, and I've been saying this entire series, they are the #1 maker of arcade racing games. They cannot be beaten. And this game is spectacular. The sense of speed you get is massive. F-Zero's always been a very fast franchise, but when you put Sega in charge of development, somehow they make it feel even faster. And the mechanics are quite different. Of all the racing games I'm showing you on this series, F-Zero controls completely differently because not only do you have the boost gauge and these boost pads, but you also have left and right thrusters that kind of act like a drifting mechanic, but in a different way. But you'll see I won the first race here. The easy course is quite easy, but this game gives you a ton of challenge, especially on later levels. But hey, a win is a win, and I'll take it for the start of the video. Moving on further into the game, you'll see that there are 6 different tracks, and they do vary a little bit between the versions. You're going to get a lot of the arcade art here. If I showed it to you, you would see that it shows the cabinet and how to step off of it. But honestly, playing this on a GameCube, it does some weird things now and again because the game wants to dispense cards to you, and it can't do that because it's a GameCube. It can't spit a card out of the GameCube, although if you could figure out how to do that, I would be impressed. But honestly, back to the racing mechanics with all of these spirals and the fact that you can go around them 360 degrees, F-Zero AX and F-Zero in general give you this whole other dimension of racing. You're not just worried about your turns, you're also worried where you are spatially in a 3D environment. It adds an extra layer that you need to manage, and at the start it might seem very confusing and you might not feel like you want to hang with it. This is the type of game that if you don't get it right off the start, you have to keep playing it. Obviously, if you play something like Daytona, you understand how it functions. You turn left, you turn right, you hit the gas, you hit the brakes. Very easy. Something like F-Zero AX, though, has all these extra components of that 360-degree ability to go around the actual race course like you're seeing here, but once your mind clicks with that and you understand it better, suddenly everything just opens up, and the sense of speed, the sense of control, and when you're doing well, the sense of success feel even more heightened because you just haven't been dealing with it on a 2D plane. You have full 3D control of that ship. And as soon as your mind trains yourself to the ability to have that full 360-degree directionality on certain courses, it clicks, and all of a sudden you're wondering, why haven't more games done this? Because this loop here, this kind of helix coil, is just so much fun to race on. The camera's turning, it's sweeping around you, and it's giving you even more of a sense of motion. Now you will see there's an energy meter on the top, and I did win this race as well. I will get into the energy meter shortly because it's a very big component of the game. But you get a good selection of characters as well. There's so many different types of ships that have different handling mechanics and different abilities as far as how they move around the course. And selecting the ship you like is not just preference, it's also to the racetrack. But this game's got a killer soundtrack. Listen, and I'll be right back. The soundtrack's really enjoyable to listen to, and the intensity of it perfectly matches the speed of the game. But I know I mentioned right before I let you listen to the soundtrack, I was talking about the boost gauge. You're going to see here that I'm going to run out of time very quickly, but you can recharge it on the side. After the first lap, you get the ability to boost quote-unquote infinitely, but you have an energy meter that you can recharge on the track. If you get too low on energy, your car explodes and you get taken out by a UFO. So there's a lot of resource management of that boost gauge, and when you see something like that, when it's open on the track, just smash that boost. You're going to recharge while you use it. But that resource management is crucial, as are the drifting mechanics, because some turns are impossible to get around. They're basically 90 degrees unless you use that thrust left and right. It's kind of like a drift, but it's also kind of like a spaceship, so it's like drifting sci-fi, for lack of a better term. But learning all of these mechanics are crucial for you getting better at F-Zero AX. You can maneuver around some corners like that, but being able to boost at the right time, being able to drift at the right time, is the difference between finishing a race in first and probably not even finishing a race at all. Because on the later levels in F-Zero AX, mistakes are costly. Right there, I just bumped the wall. I went from first to fourth instantaneously, and if you make too many mistakes, you're going to run out of time, because on the later, harder levels, the timer on this game is not very fair to you. You can definitely win the race if you're good, but of course if you're playing this on a GameCube with codes, you don't have access to the test menu, so you actually can't adjust the game's difficulty, and on default it can be ever so slightly tight, because you're going to see here, I did run out of energy. I think it's right here in a moment, and I'm going to lose this race. If I had a little more time, maybe I could have squeaked by with another checkpoint, but that's the one issue with playing this not on a TriForce, and you'll see there's that UFO because I ran out of juice. You can't get into the test menu, but honestly, just get better at the game. It won't be that big of a deal whatsoever. But it's fun in and of itself that we can even play this, because I don't own a TriForce. There's not much on it I've ever been interested in, so it hasn't landed in my arcade collection. But that's how close the console version is to the arcade version. All of the code from the arcade version, including the art assets, are on the GameCube disc. I'm surprised that they just didn't bring AX home and call it a day, but I'm sure there must have been some licensing issue where Sega had some piece of that. It was easier for Nintendo to change the name and the game up ever so slightly. But again, this looks amazing, and that's because GameCube was really good hardware for its time, and obviously the art style goes a long way to making this look good. Now, if you stopped and looked at some of the things like the trees, you'd realize they don't actually look that great if you're not moving, but the artists were smart. The sense of speed allows them to hide some lower polygonal models, because honestly you're not even seeing anything but a blur. But I love this loop here and how the level basically just spins back on itself. Sometimes you're right side up, sometimes you're upside down, and sometimes you're somewhere in between. But the course layout in this game is perfection, how you can essentially move through it, how it snakes, it's got this serpentine sort of feel to it, and you're rocking back and forth. When you pick a clean line through F-Zero AX and you're racing well, it feels like racing perfection, and that's surprising for me to say, because like I said, I don't really like F-Zero. This is the only game in this series that I care to play on a regular basis. The other ones are fine, they're just not for me. But leave me a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts on the F-Zero franchise are in general, because I would be curious to hear. I know some people love this series, I'm just kind of ambivalent on it. And I think that may be down to the fact that when I was a kid, on my birthday, I was able to pick out a game at the store, and I ended up picking out F-Zero because it looked good on the back of the box. This was in the 90s. I got it home, and honestly, I was disappointed. It was not the game I was hoping it was, so my thoughts on the series are probably 100% colored by that disappointing nostalgia moment right there. But if you've never played any game in the F-Zero franchise, definitely start here. I think it is absolutely the best, and it's not a franchise that Nintendo does a whole lot with. They enlisted Sega to develop this, and that's why you're seeing it on this retrospective. But it has everything arcade racing needs. Great track layout, great graphics, amazing handling, and intensity. When you're racing well and you're in first, you're trying to hold that line and keep it going, and when you make a few too many mistakes, you really get down on yourself and realize that it's not the game that's screwing you over, you're just not doing well enough. Like right here, I'm going to shortly run out of time, and that's because I just kept bumping the wall. You gotta run a clean line in F-Zero if you want to see the finish line, and you have to run near a perfect line if you want to see first place. But yeah, That is F-Zero AX, the hidden variant on the GameCube disc. If you really love the game, you can buy a TriForce and play it that way, but honestly, I would just do it the way I'm doing. Short of that, leave me a comment down below. I love hearing from you guys. I'll be back next week with another episode in this Racing Renaissance series, and I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but I am going to run out of time and I'm going to fall into the dirt. Bye-bye.